And welcome back to Political Update. I'm Paul Lisnick. I'm visiting with the mayor of Palos Hills, Gerald Bennett. He's been mayor for 30 years, but you have so many hats tied to so many mayors, groups, and such that you become just an expert on so many different topics. So I appreciate your being with me.
Thank you.
Pension reform. You mentioned pensions in our last segment, but let's come back to it. You know, what we owe the pension bill and what our obligations are, and they're not going away, and Springfield just won't tackle it. How does that play out at municipality level?
Paul, it's the greatest crisis that this state has faced in its history. Over 100 long-term obligations, unfunded obligations, almost $140 billion in pension debt. Here's another thing people don't understand. The state of Illinois General Assembly controls all pensions in the state. So our local police and fire pensions are controlled by the state of Illinois. We don't increase benefits. We are required to pay those benefits. And the pension breaks down three ways. One, what the employee contributes, what the municipality contributes, and then what the fund generates in interest. Well, what's happened over the last 10 years is that the pension benefits given to the police and fire by the General Assembly has driven those costs up to almost double from what they were 10 years ago. And here's what's happened. The employee has not increased any contribution on his part, and that was about 9%, 10% of his salary. And the municipality back 10 years ago, probably around 15%. It's now jumped to 30% contribution by a local municipality to that pension fund. And unfortunately, especially over the last 2 years with interest being earned on the fund itself, it's half of what they estimated. So now this is where you get this unobligated and amortized debt over a long period of time that's out of control. It's got to be changed. Recent changes were made. They didn't go far enough.
There were some good fixes. There are fixes
yes.
that do say, you can no longer have 12 jobs and collect 12 pensions when you add them all together.
But let me tell you the craziness of what took place just recently in this General Assembly is that we went down wanting to change our local pension similar to what the state did. In fact, when the state did the pension reform, they did all but three. One of them was police and fire that they didn't do, and they did this overnight. They didn't change ours. So I said, fine, we'll go down there. We want to change. We want to make it similar to what you've done with the other pensions. We put a bill together, not perfect with what we want. In the end, an amendment is added to that bill. And yet that amendment was that in 5 years, municipalities, as a penalty, if you don't come in 5 years, after 5 years, you must meet 100% of your obligation to that pension, which is insane. Or we will take the other funds that come into your municipality, like your sales tax or your state income tax.
That's another way to grab that.
And fund the pension. So in 5 years, what, a municipality, the only purpose and function we have is to exist to fund a pension. But my point is, during this same session, they're already talking about not paying their pension debt this year. City of Chicago Teachers Union, will maybe give you a 3-year break. You don't have to. You can't do those kind of things. So on one end, they're saying we don't recognize our $140 billion debt, but because local governments, we came to you with a bill. We're going to penalize you now if we give you these new pension reform issues.
So what fix? You go down to Springfield, you talk to the leadership, and they say, Mayor, what do you want us to do? What do you want them to do? We want them to do to similar to what the pension reform has taken place on the scale that it has so far. Come up, new employees, a new type of tiered pension, where it does not have the benefits of the existing pension. For example, raising the age of retirement. Lowering the benefit at the end. Right now, our police and fire are at 75% of their salary they can retire at. However, they also reduce the number of years of service. And again, those all add up to an obligation. So let's formulate this thing back down to a more reasonable thing going forward. We still need to look at what's going on now. And nobody wants to talk about that. Nobody wants to change it. And the greatest debt the state faces right now is existing pensions. And they also have existing full coverage health care, which is another addition to that pension cost. Something I've never understood, it's related in my head anyway, but when you think of how we fund Social Security, everybody pays Social Security until a certain point, 90,000, whatever that number is, 90,000, and then you're done paying for the year. And I keep thinking to myself, but those people who make hundreds of thousands of dollars, millions of dollars, and the athletes who make, why can't they just continue to pay these kinds of funds? They can afford it. I mean, is there a fix along those? And of course, it's political. We don't, there's political reasons for not doing it. But is the fix somewhere in there to just, if people are doing better, we've got to count on them to help out?
I think the problem lied in every time that a union went down there to demand a pension increase, they gave it to them without looking back at this amortized cost of how it was going to place on the fund itself. And right now, pensions they're unsustainable. Pensions basically, you can want 100% I demand 100% of my salary when I retire at age 20.
Right.
The problem is, like what happened with railroad pensions years and years ago, what happened with the auto industry is they're going to go bankrupt.
Airline
you can
industry.
ask for all you want, but the bottom line is, in which we keep telling the General Assembly, there's not going to be any money there to pay it. So we come back together and we sit down and say, let's be reasonable. We do have a fund that's out there right now. It's called the Illinois Municipal Retirement Fund. Well funded. 7.5% employee, 8.5% employer. It's a combined fund of all the funds throughout the state. Great investments. It works. And that was another suggestion we made to them. Let's take a look at how these little small pension funds, maybe they could think about consolidating their funds together and do better on an interest return back, which is critical to this whole formula. So those are the kind of things that we're saying to them. We want to sit down, work with you. We'll show you actuarials, and we'll show you all the, they know those things. They know those things. It's having the political will to do it.
And of course, people keep saying we need change and we need change, but of course, if they go to the polls at all, they go to the polls and they send the same people back. And we go through it again. And of course, it's the elected officials who select the leadership anyway. People don't vote on that. They select themselves. So, I mean, I know you said you don't believe in term limits, but do you look at even leadership positions and say at some point, after X number of years, it's not a bad idea to have new blood up there just to ensure that somebody can't have power, hold on to power, and really not care about having to make any changes?
Internally within the organization, I mean, that's a tough call. I mean, there's no laws out there. There's no statute out there. I mean, it's the right of the party, who does control, and has the right of different leadership positions. But again, I'm again the person with a half, not half empty, but half full glass. That's got to change. Either leadership itself is finally going to come to terms with its members, or its members are going to come to leadership and say, you know what, let our people go. We've got to address these problems in Springfield. We've got to answer these questions. We've got to come up with the revenues, and cut the budget. So hopefully within the ranks itself, that's how it should take place.
I hear the frustration, and I heard the frustration when you first got back from Springfield, and I saw you and talk. So I guess to wrap this component up, is change ahead? Do you look and say, I'm down there, we're talking, we'll fix it, or are we going to sit here next year and this is more of the same?
Again, knowing the players down there and believing that they're good people who want to do good, that change will come amongst their own. But if it doesn't, there is going to be, you're going to see a voter change take place in this country. But again, voters need to be educated and they need to get out and vote. Use their constitutional right.
That'd be a good idea, wouldn't it?
Yes, it would.
What I want to do is I want to actually look at some of the other hats you wear, right? Because we can talk about Springfield and keep talking about Springfield, but we didn't get the Olympics. I want to do a little postmortem on that. And CMAP, which is the Metropolitan Planning of Chicago, you're the chair of that, and there's really critical things. I want to talk about that, and also to talk about how mayors work together to make things change. We'll do all of that when we come back after these words. Stay with us.
Watching the Comcast Network, CN 100, Chicago.